Okay, I'm recording it,
Indeed.
but I'm
Awesome.
recording it without
Great.
the video showing. The the problem I've had in the past is that when you record it with the thumbnails of the people showing, it makes the actual shared portion of the screen smaller and harder to see. So I found out the other day how to turn that off, and it seems to work better. So I can tell who's talking. I have a sort of a very tiny little bar on the screen that tells me who's talking, but that's all I see. So you want to give me a sense of which of you have used Kumu to any extent, or is this? I mean, Daniel said that he finally got an account and started playing with it.
Yeah, I've also got an account and just played with it a little bit, but I discovered a lot more after watching the 20 minutes of your video that you suggested. So yeah, that was really helpful already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched that too.
Okay. So Kumu was developed to allow people to develop qualitative relationship diagrams. I primarily use it to do what the systems community calls causal loop diagrams, though there are different kinds of diagrams that you can do with it depending upon what it is that you're trying to create. I'm going to open the same templates that you saw in the video that you watched, just as a place to demonstrate for you what's in the Kumu environment. So within this environment, there are only three things that you can create. You can create an element. You can connect. If I hold the Alt, in other words, once I create this element, I can come down here and create another element, or I can hold the Alt key and simply drag from this to someplace else and create another element. Okay. So I now have a connection, and if I do this one more time, more. Anytime you put a label on something and put two spaces in it, it treats it as a hard carriage return, so it will put things on separate lines. So now that I have two connections, any two or more connections can be combined and called a loop. So a loop doesn't actually have to be a real loop. It's simply two or more connections together.
Gene, just briefly, a question, just so I understand from the beginning, the functional difference between a systems map and a stakeholder map in Kumu, is it because I just tried to, because my first project was a stakeholder map, but it doesn't seem to allow to do what you've just done, to click on the icon and create another one.
That should be a basic function of Kumu, regardless of what kind of a map you're creating. If you're on a Mac, it's not an Alt. In other words, I hold down the Alt key, mouse over it, click and drag.
The Alt key. Oh, okay. I missed the Alt key bit. Okay. Gotcha.
And on a Mac, it might be something else.
Gotcha.
Okay. So now I have this loop, all right, and there are things in this context. All there are elements, connections, and things that you have identified as a loop. And that's it. The question is what you decide to do with it. Now, for this map itself, there's a profile panel on the left, which has a place that you can write text, and it's all done in Markdown, which is probably the simplest formatting language that you can come up with. And you can also import images into it. Every element that you create also has a profile panel. Every component has a title, a type, a description, a tag, and you can add an image to it. And you can also put images in the midst of here. Now, in the earlier versions, it didn't allow you to import images. What I like about it now is that it will manage the images for you so that you don't have to put in URLs and reference images someplace else. It will actually load them into Kumu and manage them for you. So for whether it's an element, whether it's a connection, or whether it's a loop, you can describe that particular component of the map that you create. If you select a connection, notice that the title of it is an element to another element. That's the internal label of it. And if you change that and say, my first connection, it will actually label the connection for you. And it changes the title. Sorry about my voice, I'm a little gravelly this morning. It puts a comma in there and puts the rest of it there, okay? Now, in terms of types are things that you can define. Or causal loop diagrams, I have stocks, variables, and constants. You get to define these to be anything you want them to be, so that you might be creating a stakeholder map, and you might have people, and you might have places, and you might have cities, and you might have lots of different things, and you want to type them differently. You can make the types whatever you want them to be. And there's an option over here where the type is simply a field, an element type, and I've defined these, and you can, oh, okay. I didn't think I was logged in. You can define them whatever you want them to be and have as many of them as you need for whatever it is that you're dealing with. The thing that makes types useful is you can define the way that the map is styled based upon type. In other words, for elements, I have
Like the format.
two different types. Well, stocks, variables, and constants. The stock, if I tell it it's a stock, it changes the color of the text. For my connections, if I tell it that it's adds to the same, it makes it blue, and if I make it the other one, it makes it red and dashed. So those are pre-definitions that are set up that just makes it convenient, and they're definitions that I set up so that the reason that
we can set up our own definition with our own formatting.
You can style them any way that you want to.
Really? Okay.
The difficulty that people run into is Kumu used to be very simple once upon a time. But developers just keep developing, and people keep adding for features and functions, and the developers keep adding them. So the reason I created this template was because I got tired of doing all of the definitions every time that I created a new project. And I used the same definitions over and over and over again. So I just created a template, and I use that on an ongoing basis. One can go in here and say that they want to set different sizes for things, different colors. You can select a field, an element type that you want to go ahead and style it by. The styles that have already been set up, whoops, sorry, I don't want to go there yet. The styles that I've already set up here for the legend, this is what do they call this? I'm missing a word, a label. But you can decorate an element and you can change the size, and you can change the way that it's scaled based upon data. You can change the color and the transparency and add images and bullseyes and shadows and define whether or not it's part of a legend. And the problem is that people get attracted to all the shiny things, and they spend all their time playing with the options and forget what it was that they came here to build a map of to begin with, because they're just the options are endless, right? And after one styles things using the built-in crib sheet to do it by, one gets tired of doing that and finally learns the actual script, so that this is the script that it writes when you use the built-in styling, or you can just write the script yourself. And it quickly gets to a point where you say, oh, I did that before, and you come here and you copy one script and you paste it into another project. Any public project in Kumu that you can see, you can clone a copy of it and make it yours, and you can do anything you want to with it, so that you can see the script and edit it, and well, just like you created it from scratch. Okay.
So in that case, if I wanted to play around with a template that is based on what you've just been using, the one that you kind of specified what a stock and so on is, can I go publicly to where you've got that template and just draw it into one of my projects?
Right, when you go over here to the side and you go down here and you click on Fork Project. Fork is the programmer term for clone. All right, and it says fork this project, then it will create a version of it with a new name that belongs to you. I mean, the whole idea was to be able to create content that people could learn from and build on. You can also create, if you pay for an account in Kumu, you can create private projects that no one can see. You can create all of the public projects that you want to for free.
And so can people add to and change your public projects?
No. Well, if you're developing a project and you want to allow people to participate, you can add other people and allow them to if it's a private project, you can allow other people to view it. If it's a public project, you can allow other people to modify it. So multiple people can have update access to the same project. Multiple people can work on the same project at the same time, and it has a well-defined built-in collision detection, so that when you refresh, it will merge the changes made by multiple people, but it's not a real-time update of what's happening on the screen.
Right.
Okay, in terms of some other things, this little life raft down here gives me access to help. It gives you access to the shortcuts, also gives you access to the online documentation, which is voluminous in terms of different aspects of this environment that you can work with, ways that you can work with it. When you create a new project, let me go ahead and say, new project. Create a new project, and I'm going to put it in my Systems Wiki account. New test. Some test. And it's public. When I create this project, you have the option of creating 4 different types of maps. And there's a 2-minute overview video here that you should watch that gives you a sense of what those 4 types of maps are for. What it does when you select one of them, you label the map intro and you create the first map. When you get there and go look, you'll find out that this is what you got by selecting a particular type of map. It gave you a template that defines some things for you. So that if you go over here and look in the field definitions and look at element, well, not those.
How did you get onto that little screen that actually showed you the code that was automatically created from the map?
Right here, it says settings.
Settings?
Settings.
Okay, there. Okay.
Now, this is the basic editor. And down here it says switch to advanced editor.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, now I got you.
Okay. Now, this is called this part may be more than slightly confusing. In Kumu, what you create is a project. A project has one or more maps. What you create here, what I was creating before is called a map. You can have multiple maps, and each map can have its own view, or they can all use the same view. So that if you look over here, it says current view is called intro, and it's the default view is intro. Okay, you could have a whole set of elements, and you could have them styled in one way, come up here and select a different view and change the styling of all those elements, just because there would be a separate set of code for that particular view. Think of it like a map of the USA. You could have a road map, you can have a street map, you can have elevation map, but it's all the same content. In other words, let me create an element here and call it an element, okay? This is the default styling that came with that particular template. If I go here and say, I want to create duplicate map, delete map. Here, and say new map. It says, which template do I want for that new map? I could tell it I want a different map.
So you can do different styles of map within the same project.
Right. So now there's intro and there's another map. And there's intro and then there's a view for another map. So if I'm looking at another map.
Using the same data?
Yes. So if I look over here, this is the stakeholder template. If I go back here and look at intro, this is the systems template. So here, if I say I want to add an element, and I say, notice what shows up here?
Oh, okay.
That's the piece of content that is on the other map. So the content is universal, but it might appear on one or more maps. So if I change the description of this, some text, I go back over to another map, notice that the element looks different because it's got a different template that defines how it's supposed to look. But if I click on it, there's the text.
Okay.
Okay, so the same data, and it's just different ways of basically visually analyzing that data.
Correct. Different ways
Or,
of presenting it. Okay.
Presenting the data, yeah.
So like you could use it like layers, I guess, on a.
You could look at it as layers, depending upon what portion. In other words, I could have 50 different elements, and I could have 5 of them here. I could have 10 of them on another map, 10 of them on another map. Some of them might be on all the maps. It depends what it is that I'm trying to develop a set of relationships for and present to someone. So in other words, this is a typical causal loop diagram for something. This is a completely different kind of relationship map that's meant to show some relationships between whatever these entities are. And there are entities on here which are of different kind. If I go let me look for PayPal Mafia, which is one that Jeff did early on. They have images for people. They have some of these things which are companies. So if you look at the types in this particular project, they're company, person, or organization. If you look, and if you notice, here's a person. It says this is a person, and it has some additional elements that are defined for a person. Whereas if you look at a company, there are a different set of elements. So while the basics
for us,
for every entity, you get a label, a title, a type, text, tags, and a picture. You can add as many fields as you want. And when you add fields, hold on. Let me go back here and simply add a field and call it new field.
Just to kind of make it easier for me to understand this, if you have these, so you have elements as the general term. If going to the map about the PayPal Mafia that you just showed, if I want to have in a map organizations, like for example PayPal, but then I also want to have individuals, I can then specify different types of elements. One of them would be organizations, one of them would then be individuals.
Right.
Right?
You get to define the types to be anything you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. And I can also, the relationships, like the arrows between them, like for example, could I make some arrows that say finances and other regulates and other informs?
Right. Here is the types for the connectors on this particular map. They're employee, founder, investor, and partnership. And notice that some of them are gray and some of them are green. The green ones are investor. This is an employee founder, and I don't know where. And if you go look at the script, it tells you. In other words, the investor. You want the connection type of investor to be this color, the element type of person to be this size and this font weight and this color. And that's what I said about it. Just there's an endless array of characteristics that you can play with and assign to whatever it is that you create. And that's the part that we'll just get lost in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, just I think first this is the part that's super interesting, which is to create the different types of entities in this, kind of stakeholder or project mapping, and then having enough fields that we can import data into and that connect to the other, databases that we have. And then, and really, I think explore what fields we want to have for each type of element.
Correct.
And kind of create a template for this, right? That we can then replicate.
I think I'm wondering whether, there's one, to my mind, there's this, we could either on a kind of general abstract level go through what is possible on the map, but on the other hand, it might be quite useful for Ruth to just share what the specific mapping project that we would like to embark on is, and then have maybe Eugene comment how to avoid going down these rabbit holes. Like what are the key types of categories, types of elements that we want to specify in the beginning, so we basically create a leaner map. Like, for example, I'm imagining the overall arch is we're trying to build an ecosystem of people that are both funding and supporting regenerative practice, whether it's social or ecological regeneration on the ground. And we also ideally want to map how these organizations that are doing the work on the ground can begin to become a learning network. So there's one layer that is who's funding them and or who could fund them and how, and the other layer is who's working in a specific area with specific expertise that somebody else who's also working in regeneration might need. Ruth, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think just to say, to say that we also, I think there are a few different types of elements that we want to map, and there will be individuals, organizations, funders. So I think it's really important to play around. And then I'm still trying to figure out we want to map, and then probably being able to have different types of connections. So one connection is capacity building between projects, and maybe one type of connection is money flows, like financial capital flows. I think it's just organizing what is the best information for us to map that can give us some intelligence when we want to explore this network.
So there's a key part of what you said that's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Play around. Okay. Go into the environment, create some things, and play with it. Don't approach it as though you have to figure out how to get it right initially. I mean, the template that I use currently, I have probably modified 25 times in the last 2 years. So create something and play with it, because in playing with it, you will get a better sense of what it is that you think you're trying to do. I tell people that you can read books and you can watch people ride a bicycle forever, but the only way to learn to ride a bicycle is to get on it and fall off a few times. And in the process, you will develop an awareness and understanding and a sense of balance, so that you begin to be able to ride the bicycle. And it's the same thing. I mean, the biggest difficulty people have in Kumu is trying to figure out how to deal with a blank piece of paper. Because they're afraid to make a mistake. And it's not about mistakes. It's about learning. It's about trial and learning. I mean, I keep trying to advise people to get rid of this trial and error phrase, because it's trial and learning. In doing things, you learn enough to do things better.
But so let's assume I play around and I create my first map, and I create elements in it that are individuals, like people, and others that are organizations.
Yes.
And then I get later on to a point where I just want to change a specific piece of the format of how I've generalized people on that map. Is there a way to, if I want to do changes to all individuals, let's say if I built a map that already has 50 individuals on it, can I make changes to all individuals, or do I have to go to 50 individuals to change what I wanted to make?
Okay. I'm making a clone of this project. So this is a copy of PayPal Mafia that belongs to me. I just cloned it, okay? Or forked it, as they like to call it here. All right, so this is mine now. I can change anything I want to. So if I go ahead and say I want to collect let's see. I can select shift connection. All right, I've just selected all of the connections, and I can change any of the attribution or any of the different aspects of that particular element. Or if I want to change the way that it's styled, I can go to here and I can change the way that the investors are styled, or the way that let's see, the way that the founders are styled, so that the founder employee, let me make this, all right, I just changed them to blue. I don't know what A, B, C, D, E, F is, but I mean, there's a defined color for it. You can pick out, there are places on the internet where you can look at the color charts and get the codes for it. Or you could go back here to the basic editor and say that I want to change this, and I want to change this color to blue.
Okay.
So I've done that. Now those are a dark blue. Okay. So you have access to everything. It's there, and because some of them they're already typed. Let me get rid of this. All right. So the investors.
So we can change.
All right. You can change all of the investors. You can search. You can do a selection so that I can say I want all of the where is it? Connection type is employee founder. There are 40 of those. So I use the selection. I've selected all 40 of those. And I could go ahead and change I could change the type of all of them if I wanted to, or assign something else to them. So you can, based upon the way that they're currently defined, you can change the data associated with them, or you can change the style associated with them. Is that sufficiently confusing?
Great.
Now, the arrows can go one way or both ways, mutual or reverse, and you can reverse them. The little thing here is to put parallel lines on them for delays, which is typically associated with causal loop diagrams. The focus is, if you select something and hold on to it, I brought that into focus and it hides everything else. You can also go up here and say expand the focus, or you can decrease the focus. If you put stuff in the trash, it's just like putting it in the trash on a PC. It's not really gone. So if I were to delete Reid Hoffman,
Mhm.
The connections are gone, but if I go here to say add element and I type, all right, Reed Hoffman shows up here
Mhm.
and I can bring him back. He's just not in the place I wanted him. I'd have to replace the connections, but the data itself isn't gone.
And this is between sessions as well. Like if I play with a new clone, I forked the project, I cloned it, I played around with it, I did a few deletions, and I go back to that project the next time, it'll still be in the trash.
Yeah, the trash is still there. So if you go to the admin panel over here and go to trash, you can look and see what's in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you could delete specific items, or you can empty the trash.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing is there are two types of accounts in Kumu. There are individual accounts and there are organizational accounts. There are a few differences between them. One is that an organizational account costs $10 a month, and
Right.
and that still doesn't get you to private projects. But what it does get you is there's an option. And in terms of items on here, you can decorate. Hold on a minute. I'm looking. Okay. You can have the items on here pinned or unpinned. So if I selected all of the content, not that content. If I selected all of this stuff, hold down the shift key and select all of it. I can unpin it. So that it's all now floating. Mm-hmm. So that all this stuff is not where I put it. It sort of figures out where it wants to put it. Mm-hmm. And there are values that you can assign to how dense it should make the hairball, or how tight, or how loose, or whatever. But the part that I was trying to get to is if I take this project and if I move this, admin, if I transfer this project to my organizational account, what that essentially does is change the URL for this project. Before it said Systems Wiki up here. Mm-hmm. There's a feature in the organizational account for discussion threads, which they call issues. You can select any item, whether it be an element, a connection, or a loop, and say that you want to create a discussion about that element. This is, turn the caps on. And I create this issue. Notice that it put an asterisk on that item. This is a discussion about a connection. Notice that there's now an asterisk on that connection. And I can then go ahead and close that, but I can tell that there's ongoing discussion about this and this, and I can go, they call them issues.
But these are discussions, these are discussions within the organization, not with the organization in Kumu. These are like for the team working on this.
Correct.
And can any member start a discussion or just admin?
Well, the way that it is currently designed, for a public project, any person who has a Kumu username and password can access any public project and start a discussion on an item. the only way to restrict it to a smaller group of people is if you make it a private project and only give certain people access to the project. Now,
how accessible are projects? Like, if we created one that was public, would it be quite visible on the Kumu website, or is it kind of hidden in a list?
You can find them. Okay, if you go to explore the gallery, is it there? No, these are some projects that people did. If you go to community, you can search the community for a particular for a particular project by name or by creator, whatever. They're not readily visible unless somebody's looking for them. I have over 100 public projects and nobody's ever touched any of them. So, some people are more paranoid than others, and I have not found people wandering around messing up projects. And if I did, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't take long for the developers to get rid of that person.
Okay.
In terms of sharing the project, could you embed the link into a web page so that people could click it? And would they need a Kumu account to be able to follow through with that click, or could they view it in a browser without being logged into Kumu?
The project itself, if it's public, all a person needs is the URL to access it. If you give people the ability to modify the project, they need to use a Kumu username and password. Okay. So in terms of, but the thing is, if you look at this particular project, this is the URL for the project. And this particular map is called Who's Who. If you look at the URL, you notice there's a # Who's Who. So this is a URL for a project that had multiple maps. This project has multiple maps. Notice that this says new test # intro. This says new test # another map. So you can give somebody a URL to point them to a particular map. You can give someone a URL to point them to a particular element in a map, so that this is the URL for this project, this map, and this element within the map.
Just briefly, like on that page that you're on right now, it says add tag. What's the point of adding tags? How are they useful?
Tags are whatever you want. Junk, time, space, dirt. You can add whatever you want in terms of tags, and the tags are searchable. All right, it says it belongs in, time is in an element. Time might be, we create another element. Says more stuff. And let me go ahead and add.
So for example, in a map that would have organizations and individuals, like you could just tag organizations with organization and individuals with individual, and then you could very quickly see all.
Right, though it would be easier to
to just element type.
Right. No,
element type.
Type are the kind of thing that you typically use to control the styling of elements, and also style them based upon tags, if you want.
Okay.
A thing can only have one type, but it can have multiple tags. So at the moment, this has the tags of dirt and space, and this has tags of junk, time, space, and dirt. So if I search on space, it says there are two things where space occurs, okay? And was almost like pulling teeth to get them to do this, but this is absolutely marvelous in it. All right, notice it's just token searching. So it says SPST, so it found more and stuff. Okay. SP. Why to find anything for SP? SP.
What does SP stand for?
Space.
Ah, space. Oh, duh. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So see, it knows what it's doing. Okay. And if I do SP, hold down the shift key and hit enter, it actually selects those two elements. So that if I was searching for, let me go back to here. Let me search for element type is person, or 17 of those. Use the selector. It has now selected all 17 of those people. I could edit any one of the data elements related to people, or, I'm sorry, now I deselected it because I clicked over here. Or I could change the type of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think hopefully you begin to get the sense of why it is that people get lost in the possibilities. The best thing is spend more time drawing the relationships, thinking about the relationships, and less time playing with the styling, and add the styling little by little as you go. So you know that you think you want this type of connection and this type of connection. Just draw the elements and label them and draw connections between them. And after you do some of it and think about it for a while, then go ahead and define the types for the elements and the types for the connections. And this, let me see, Jason Shoeless. I'm looking for stuff. That's not okay. I was looking for a project, but I don't seem to remember what I called it. The ongoing difficulty. Questions?
I think Hanna had one, and then I have a question afterwards.
Yes, Hanna.
Yeah, I had a few. Sorry, first I missed the beginning of the meeting. Sorry, I was working on another project.
It's all right. We recorded it, and we'll send you a link.
Okay, should I type in my email for you to have that to send it?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks.
Just put it in the chat window.
Okay, great. Also, Jean, I was, because we have a networking platform that we've been using Kumu for, and have been playing around with it, but need to dive deeper into some of the functions. And I was trying to find some good demo videos online and was really having a hard time. And I know a little while ago, I came across an organization that was offering tutorials on Kumu, and I can't remember the name. I can't find them, and I was wondering if you might know what I'm talking about. Something like Earthlink or Gaia something maybe. Does that ring a bell at all? Like a support organization that's been doing tutorials for Kumu?
No, the Kumu people have been doing tutorials.
Okay. Are there online some videos that we can access?
They did a quick tips. There's a bunch of videos that they have done in quick tips playlist right here.
Okay.
There's more of them than I realized.
Okay.
So let me, where is?
So I was doing some search online and didn't find these.
That. Where is the chat window? Oh, there it is. Okay, I just put the URL for that playlist in the chat window. I asked them to start putting those videos in the appropriate places in the online documentation, which is where they would actually be most useful to people, so that they had that video in the appropriate context. Because the problem with developers writing documentation is they know too much about what they're writing about. And they forgot what it was not to know what they're writing about, so that they don't have a sense of what kind of question new people coming to the environment have questions about. So going to this help life raft down here and going to the online documentation, which is just docs.kumu.io, and I just put the URL for this in the chat window also. The first thing you get to is welcome to Kumu Help Docs, and there's a 5-minute quick start building your own map and frequently asked questions. And then it talks about decorating and filtering and clustering and types of accounts. And those 9 things are the basic overview of the environment.
Great, thank you. And then I don't know if we're stopping this at 1, but if we did do any more examples, I was wondering if you could just show like quickly how we would just start something with some of our elements that we're going to be using. But if we're stopping at 1, then we don't have time. So never mind.
Well, I have time.
Okay.
So, folks, I have to go at 1. But if this is being filmed, happy for you to continue.
Okay.
Ruth, you're the host, aren't you? So if you go, you probably kick us all off of the recording.
No, I can just handle my hosting to Jean, for example.
Ah, okay.
I can make him co-host.
And maybe I have something to add into Hannah's question, if that's all right.
Yes, James.
Do you have any advice on importing data from like Excel or something like this?
Down here, there's an option called import data, which you can get from an Excel spreadsheet or a CVS file, or you can link to a Google Docs spreadsheet.
Oh, great.
And the formatting is less than obvious. My advice to people is create a sample map of what it is that you want to import and export that map and look at it and fill in the blanks. Okay? Because what you export is the format you want to import.
Great tip. So
that's a good idea.
So we map all the elements, the connections, and export, and then fill that in and put it back in.
No, you can put all the elements and the connections, everything in the import.
I also saw somewhere on the website it said to do labels, type, and description in your Google Doc, and then use those to import it.
Right. So if you have for these items, notice that they have additional data items associated with them. You can import all that stuff too. It's just you have to have it all formatted in the right order so that Kumu doesn't get confused, which is why my comment was figure out what you want the structure to be, do a sample export of it, and that will show you how all the fields are laid out, and then you can just go ahead and populate the fields to do the import.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the question was, let me delete this and delete this. And you wanted to do something with some of your kinds of content?
Yeah, I just wanted to feel like we could walk away and like, okay, we can start importing the members that are already active with our group and start mapping out some of our things.
Is that a large number of members?
No, even just show us like 4 or 5 people maybe or something. I don't know, but if other people have other questions that they'd rather see, I just thought it might be helpful to see this done with our uses.
Now,
Okay.
they're floating, okay? So that they separated themselves. This is zoom to fit. This is zoom out, zoom in. Okay, so you can these are floating unless you go ahead and define the default in that you say that you don't want them to be floating. Connect size by change, more options, customized, filter, highlight, cluster. Maybe it's here. New template layout. Okay, so now what I'm just telling it is that all the elements are pinned. They will stay wherever I put them. I don't know where that came from. But now all the elements are where I want them. Now, depending upon what kind of a network you're creating, sometimes having them pinned is good and sometimes having them not pinned is good. So you've got people. What else do you want on here?
Let's say countries, and you could just throw in some random countries. I'm thinking like where will the refugee camps that we're working with. And so then to associate the people with what countries they're working in. Those are like so then you just draw. Okay. Did you have to click something to start doing the lines of association?
Yeah, I held down the Alt key.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have ended up moving the items around.
Okay.
And I should have defaulted this so that they were directed so that it showed, because he probably wants it directed in terms of pointing to the country that they're working in.
Okay.
Now, what I would then do, because I knew, all right, I would select Bosnia, hold the Shift key and select Ireland, Turkey, and I would go ahead and say the type is country.
Okay, so it's that easy to create a new type. That's good.
So, and then I want to say Ruth, Mary, James, Daniel, and I want to say the type is person. And the problem is that this, oh, okay, those are countries. So now what I can do is come over here and say, that I want to set the defaults or options I'm looking for. Default, decorate element, no, wrong one. Decorate elements. I want to say for element type is person. I want to change the size to 8, and I want the color to be orange. And so the people, and it now shows up down here in the legend as people. And I can then go ahead and say, I also want to decorate the element type is country, and I want to change the size on that to 24 and change the color to green and say country. So that now I have a legend of people and country, and the map looks like this. I also, there's apparently the default connection style has got the color of the connection varying from source to destination.
That's cool.
Now, when I went in and did this definition, if I look at the editor, this is what Kumu wrote based upon what I selected out of those options. It wrote this script for me. I can go back here, whoops, sorry. I can go back to the basic editor and I can modify that script using the widget. That's it. It's a widget. Is it a widget? Maybe. That helps me do that layout until such time as I get tired of playing with the widgets and I finally figure out the code and just modify the stuff directly. So the reason for this coloring between the two is part of the Stakeholder Template. If I take this out and save it, it's no longer static. Everything is now floating. Should be floating. No, it's still, oh, well, any new stuff I create would be floating, but everything is currently still pinned because it was pinned, but the default is now floating. So I'll go ahead and unpin it. So now all this stuff is floating. So what else do you want on here besides people and countries?
I mean, that's fine. I just kind of wanted to see it first, how to make it. I mean, we would ultimately be adding in needs and assets and resources, but this is a good way to get us started, I think.
Okay.
Could we put a base layer on this of an actual geographical map and then pin these points to the map?
You can go ahead and drop a geographical map behind this. I have not done one of them. It's it's
That would be a great idea. Get our
that's
world
great.
mapped. Yeah.
Geo Template. So it lets you build your business on top of geographical maps. Yeah, there's a video here that explains how to do it. And it says, use template Geo.
Wow, that's clever.
Where was I?
We'd have to pin it, wouldn't we? Otherwise it would float around, but that could work well.
I've never used this feature. So I would, do what I always do is I go watch the video, read the documentation. I'm confused. So then I go ahead and post a note on the Kumu Stack group. They have a Stack group called Kumidi, which currently has 3,000 people in it, and the tech support is real good. So people ask questions, and Alex is doing the majority of the support. And to get to their community, chat Slack. If you go to this URL and request to join, they will go ahead and make you a member of the Slack group.
You don't need an organizational account for that, or?
No.
Oh, great.
Is there anywhere where it kind of lists like a dictionary that they're using kind of clever names for things, so it's hard to always pick up on what they mean immediately?
What they mean immediately?
Well, I mean, even for trash, there was a different terminology they were using for trash, and just all of these clever little things, but that's not always necessarily apparent. So I was just wondering if there's
there are not. There are less than a dozen labels in this environment. So I mean, you create elements, connections, and loops, and you style them, and there are a set of default attributes associated with those things, and you can add different elements, and the elements have characteristics, so that if you go to fields and look at companies, this is the definition they did. Companies founded, it's one or more entities, it's a URL, it's autocomplete. There are no predefined values. It's
okay.
You have to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it's a big elephant. The thing though is, if you just start simple and begin building the network, you can worry about all of the shiny things little by little along the way, as opposed to trying to understand them all at once, because then it becomes overload.
I think this has given us a really good groundwork to start all that extra learning, though. So that's really good.
Okay, Mary and James and Daniel, you want to put your email address in the in the chat window also? Because
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just added Daniel since he's left.
oh, okay, all right.
And you have Ruth's, I'm sure.
Yeah, Ruth was in the invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for Mary and James, and Daniel, it was just your name and that's your email address.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I added mine early on.
So after you play around with your map for a while, send me a note and we'll get online and I'll look at it and offer you some thoughts if you want some.
Oh, that would be excellent. Yeah, thank you so much.
Really great.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah,
This has been an inspiring session. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Super helpful.
Yeah.
And I'll send you. I mean, it'll probably take a while for once the video saves, it has to process in Zoom, and then YouTube has to process it. But I'll send you a link before long.
Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Y'all have a great day, and I hope it wasn't too confusing.
No, it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it answered a lot of questions. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, all.
Okay, good to see you all.
Thank you.